Good evening, everyone. I am Rebecca Friedman, the founding director of the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab here at FIU. Our Public Humanities Lab is one of the university's preeminent programs, and it's the hub for all things humanities on campus, with an emphasis on community focus and public-facing work. So we get to do all kinds of fun and meaningful work all of the time with partners all around the greater Miami and beyond. And that includes the three organizations represented here tonight. So I'm thrilled to be here. One of our projects I was asked to talk about, which is funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, that we engage with in the Public Humanities Lab, is the creation of an interdisciplinary program in Miami Studies, which seeks, among other themes, to understand the complexities of the city in which we live, from its history of anti-Black violence to its rich kaleidoscope of cultures to the leisure culture associated with Miami Beach. Rather than seeing Miami as an empty slate or a tabula rasa without a history, we hope to learn with our students about the many layers of Miami's past, present, and future. Its vulnerabilities and creativities, its beauty and its injustices that surround us every day, in order to ultimately help and find reconciliation and healing within our communities and within ourselves. So tonight's program, On the Avenue, in my estimation, is part of that process. On the Avenue is an ongoing series that's a collaboration among the Wolfsonian FIU, the Jewish Museum of Florida FIU, and the Miami Beach Urban Studios. Each installment focuses on a common theme, and it is approached from three perspectives, one from each institution on Washington Avenue on Miami Beach. Tonight, we're going to hear lots of creative and fun and interesting and moving stories, real and imagined, about Miami. Each of the three Washington Avenue institutions has chosen a speaker or two to share more than Miami lore. The way it's going to work is that each of our three speakers, or four speakers, will speak, and then we will have a chance for Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions throughout the program, and then we will moderate them and take them at the end. So without any further ado, I give you our first speaker, chosen by representing the Wolfsonian FIU this evening, a woman who has become one of my true heroines, the chairwoman of the board of the historic Hampton House, among many other things that she does, Ms. Jacqui Colyer. Jacqui Bland Colyer was born, let's see you, Jacqui, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was reared in Miami, Florida. Jacqui often refers to herself as a daughter of Liberty City. She graduated from Dade County Public Schools, Winthrop University, received her master's degree from Barry University, and is a doctoral candidate at the University of Miami in higher education. Jacqui began her career as a social worker in the Department of Children and Families and Big Brothers and Sisters, and taught introductory courses at Florida Memorial University, leading to her becoming a professor at Miami-Dade College for 17 years. Always active in the community, she wrote a grant for the Dade County Department of Housing and later became the Director of Resident Services at the Department of Housing. She eventually rose to become the Regional Director of the Florida Department of Children and Families in both Miami and, interestingly, Chicago. But on the way to retirement, her friend and her dear mentor, Dr. Enid Pinkney, asked her to serve on the board of the historic Hampton House. Jacqui discovered a talent she had not noticed, in her own words, the joy of learning about and remembering the past, her history, her community's history, the stories she heard during the Jim Crow era that shaped her community. And then Jacqui began her encore career in historic preservation and restoration, and we're so grateful. She and her sister have rescued homes in Liberty City neighborhoods. Her current project, the historic Lindsay House, was once owned by a Miami entrepreneur, one of the richest Black men in Miami during the 1930s and 40s. But his story, like so many others, has been lost to history because no one has told them, or any of the stories of a community, and those stories must be told. And thus, historic preservation and restoration has become her passion and her new vocation and career. And I add, she is truly a gem of a human and I get to work with her. So thank you so much, Jacqui, for generously sharing your words tonight. Thank you.
Rebecca, you're wonderful. You know, I'm going to talk tonight about a place that I love, the historic Hampton House. And as you can see, I'm sitting in the historic Hampton House, and the picture in the background, the mural in the background, is the iconic photo taken by Bob Gamel of Cassius Clay after he won the fight, the heavyweight championship against Sonny Liston. And to me, the Hampton House has always been this very, very special place. I think that my first memory of the Hampton House was as a child riding on the bus on number 27 as it rode down 27th Avenue. And I used to just think to myself, what an amazing, beautiful building, because it was the only building in my community that even had the kind of architectural structure that you see, that I would see when I rode or when I was on Miami Beach, because it really did have that mid-century modern architecture, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And so I thought to myself, God, that can't be a place for Black people. That must be a place for white people. But then I started looking and I noticed that it was all Black people. So it was just amazing to me to be able to see that such a place like the Hampton House was in my community. And then I remember my good friend Gayla, told me that she took swimming lessons at the Hampton House. And I went like, how does that work? And she said, oh, they have a pool. In fact, I think it's a big pool. And I saw Jacqui Robinson there. Now, you know how you look at your friend and go, yeah, right. But, you know, it turned out to be true, because a couple of weeks later, or sometime during the week, I read in the Miami Times, or I was told about a story in the Miami Times about Jacqui Robinson being at the historic Hampton House. Can you imagine, as a child, learning to swim in a pool and having Jacqui Robinson walk by the pool as you learned how to swim? Well, that's what happened in Liberty City. That's what happened in Brownsville. And it was because of Jim Crow laws. Black children were not allowed to learn how to swim in the municipal pool. So the director of the YMCA got with all of the Green Book hotels, and if you'll show a Green Book hotel, one of the guide for Green Book, there are a lot of hotels and just places, just safe spaces where Black people could go during the Jim Crow era. And so if you'll notice there's hotels, there are garages, nightclubs, every kind of thing you could think of. And the historic Hampton House was about all of them. It wasn't a garage, but it sure was a nightclub, a dinner club, and a beautiful place, just a beautiful, beautiful place with people like Aretha Franklin, Lena Horne, Sammy Davis Jr., all of these entertainers who couldn't stay on the beach stayed at the historic Hampton House and in other Green Book hotels throughout the community, throughout the Black community. And I was so enthralled. Like I said, you can tell that I love riding down 27th Avenue on bus number 27. And I saw on the marquee that Jackie Wilson was going to be at the Hampton House. So I decided that I was smart and that I could figure out a way to get in. So I sneaked in to the historic Hampton House and watched, it was just the Hampton House then, and watched Jackie Wilson sing Lonely Teardrops. So, you know, that's one of my stories. That's the second one of my stories about the historic Hampton House. And then I think the one that is most remarkable to me is the story about, it's not a story, it's the truth. It's how Dr. Enid Pinckney basically saved the historic Hampton House from being demolished. The Hampton House was about to be demolished because it had fallen on hard times after integration occurred. And Georgia Ayres said that we got what we wanted, but we lost what we had. And one of the things that we lost was all of the Green Book hotels and all of the Green Book businesses, because once integration happened, you know, African Americans decided they would go to any of the places that they couldn't go to, that they were banned from during Jim Crow. So Dr. Pinckney went on a 15-year journey, basically, to save the historic Hampton House and to bring it back to life. Oscar, if you want to go to another one of the slides. And this is a green book that you'll see down with cars on it, and it just shows basically the green books throughout the ages. The next one. And then here you have one, a motorist guide covering the United States, and it says, carry your green book with you, you may need it. And that was always true for Black people traveling in the United States during the Jim Crow era. And I hope you noticed that I didn't say traveling in the South. It was Jim Crow was all over America. So, being able to have the freedom of travel, you had to make sure that you'd be safe. Next one. And this is the trains, it tells you how to get on trains and which ones and what to expect when you got on the train, because once you cross the Mason-Dixon line, that's when everything changed, and Black people were no longer allowed to sit at the front of the train. They had to sit at the back of the train. Next one. And these are the kinds of signs that you would see. This one has El Paso, Texas. But sadly enough, this was what we call a sundown town, because Blacks were not allowed, in these places after a certain hour. And Miami Beach was also a sundown town. My mom tells a story of having to show her ID while she worked on the beach back in the 50s. So there's one more, I think. And that's just how you made reservations to stay at one of the Green Book hotels throughout the United States, because they were everywhere. And some of them were, many of them weren't really, really nice. But the Hampton House was one of the nicest hotels and had some of the biggest entertainers in America stay at the Hampton House. And I hope you've seen the movie One Night in Miami, because that's why that iconic mural that's over my shoulder is shown, because this is where Cassius Clay came after the big fight. And Jim Brown from the Cleveland Browns was here with him, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and the four of them, really talked about what was going on in this country and how they felt they could impact it and change the world. So I think my time is up. Nobody's giving me a timer here. And so, so I just wanted you to know that I don't want to take up anybody's time more than I have, but I'm hoping that you'll ask questions and that I can help with answering them. And I'm asking you and inviting you to come to this historic Hampton House. We're located at 4240. I'll put it in the chat. Northwest 27th Avenue. It's an amazing, amazing place. And I promise you, you'll be just mystified with all the things you'll learn once you visit the Hampton House, a Green Book Hotel. Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you so much for your words, Jacqui, and for sharing your stories with us tonight. And I also encourage everyone to go to the historic Hampton House. It's kind of like nothing else. So, and now we get to turn to our second speaker of this evening, the incredible creative Christina Peterson, who is tonight representing Miami Beach Urban Studios. Christina was born in Stockholm, Sweden, and grew up in Miami, Florida. Hi there. Her large-scale drawings, videos, sculptural installations, and group performances focus on the history and environment of Florida. Local residencies and exhibitions in non-traditional spaces like Everglades National Park, Biscayne Nature Center, and the Deering Estate reflect her lifelong passion for her hometown and its complex ecosystems. Public programming and local collaborations have become central to her art practice, engaging the audience in an understanding of their own world on a deeper level. She is the recipient of a Knight Grant, Ellie's Creator Award, and Florida Cultural Consortium Fellowship, and is a Fulbright Scholar. She is in the collections of the Perez Art Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art Miami, the Bass Art Museum, the Margolis Collection, and the Four Seasons Hotel. She's the 2021 Art Sale Artist in Residence, a nomadic research-based residency, collaborating with Friends of the Everglades to create an illustrated compendium of urgent water issues in South Florida. So lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Christina. I can't wait to hear your words. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I wanted Jacqui to talk more. I feel like she was short. Now it's going to seem long. I'm so happy to be here, squeezed between two stars, as it were. You know, I think it's such an interesting panel. It's kind of a microcosm of what's happening in the art world, where so many of us are tired of this restrictive old system of valuing art monetarily. We want to engage directly with people and places that inspire us. So these panels are really great. I'm going to start off showing a short video that was part of Miami Book Fair commission last season when they went totally online, asked me to participate in this locals only project to activate places on a map of Florida. I'm not actually sure anyone watched these videos, so you might be the first. And these are not, I feel like since Billy Corben's speaking next, I have to say these are not high tech. It's just me with a camera on a tripod, running around in a Victorian morning cloak and weirding people out. So, but these are great stories and undervalued stories. So kind of starting at the origins of Miami.
In 1896, Henry Flagler was extending his railroad into a nondescript village on the banks of the Miami River. He needed a town there, so he sent young John Sewell, a trusted employee, just months before the railroad arrived. Among other things, Sewell was involved in the incorporation of the city, its first election, the building of its streets and channels, water and sewage infrastructure, and opening its first businesses. He continued to oversee the development of the city for the next 30 years. He knew and worked with all the early pioneers worth knowing, the Tuttles and the Brickells, and became an early mayor. He saw young Miami, as he put it, from the inside of the ring. Early on, he also oversaw construction of the Royal Palm Hotel. Flagler wanted the best spot at the mouth of the Miami River, of course, where a huge ancient Tequesta burial mound stood, like a small mountain, some 25 feet above water, 100 feet long and 70 feet wide, containing 50 or 60 skulls. With unabashed brutality, John Sewell not only ordered Black Bahamian laborers who likely believed in the sacredness of such a mound to move the bones and bury them in an unmarked place. He gave away some skulls as souvenirs. Construction likewise destroyed both the remains of history now erased. Flagler could claim he had built Miami on untouched wilderness.
Was that muted the whole
In
time?
1913, construction began on a house of native oolite limestone that locals would dub Sewell's Castle. Named Hallisey Hall, which is seminal for New Moon, it was once Miami's largest house and the ultimate sign of Sewell's success. It now sits buried within high rises on Jackson Memorial Ground.
So basically that was the spot where John Sewell built his home, and he was in charge of this removal of this mound. And this is an image of the Bahamian workers removing this mound. It's such an iconic moment for me that's hard to imagine a more symbolic moment in Miami history than this burial mound that survives for thousands of years and then is leveled and in essence thrown in the garbage to build a hotel for Flagler's rich friends. That maybe is like part of the magic in Magic City, right? Flagler and Tuttle were master illusionists who told, you know, anyone who'd listened that they had tamed this untouched wilderness, and that myth still very much persists, even though we have civilizations older than the pyramids here, we have fauna older than the redwoods. Of course, it wasn't just the Tequesta, it was the Calusa, the Seminoles, Spanish missionaries, slave raiders, shipwrecked sailors, and centuries of Bahamian Caribbean presence. Here is a map, shows a few things that actually shows the mound here. If you see on the bottom right, what's marked lines, that is actually the mound. It's still there. And above that is Colonel English's slave plantation. This is from 1849. And there is Fort Dallas here, you can see too. Sorry, I lost my place. So Julia Tuttle, perhaps the biggest proponent of revisionist history, she moved into the plantation and she would praise the wild lime trees to visitors, even though by her own records, she knew citrus wasn't native to South Florida. And she called her home Fort Dallas, even though she'd moved into a structure built by enslaved people. She also described several other Indian mounds and shell middens in the area. So while I put Flagler at the top of the list of villains that need to be taken down, I'm really not a big fan of Julia either, particularly when there's a much better candidate I can talk about in a minute. This was another drawing my friend just sent me that's fantastic, that was done by an army member. It came down in 1849, and you can see the mound there next to number 22. So it was so large that, you know, it was used as a navigational device. And this, another friend sent me. This is the cool thing that happens when you become a nerdy into history. You meet the like 6 other people in town who are into it, and you share stuff. So this is actually a page from River of Grass, and you can see in the second paragraph describe Sewall removing the burial mound, which I mentioned because it's just, you know, this was not, so while it's mostly forgotten history, it was by no means unknown. And the other thing I wanted to point out was the part that's highlighted on top. Mr. William Brickell, who owned land on both sides of the river, has never had, you know, sufficient credit for donating land. In fact, it was actually Mary Brickell, who was the businesswoman of the two, and who arguably deserves to be called Mother of Miami as much as Julia, and certainly had a far less sort of self-interested hubris of the two women. In fact, the Brickells were here decades before and after Julia. They also gave land to Flagler. They are on the founding documents, but for a variety of reasons, you know, they were buried. Now, the reason I know this is because of the diligent work of real historians, in particular my friend Cesar Becerra, who just published this amazing book, Orange Blossom 2.0, for Miami's 125th anniversary, which I'm not touting just because I was asked to create the drawing of Mary on the right, but it was pretty cool. But I just want to point out that one of the main reasons Mary's forgotten is that until recently, there were no pictures of her. There were plenty of pictures of Julia, though. People really like pictures and old buildings as a way to connect to history. That makes sense, but especially in Florida, South Florida, to reckon with the fact that just because those things don't exist because of our weather, in many cases, doesn't mean we don't have a long, rich history. So a little of my own work. This is an exhibition last summer I did at Locust Projects. It was the culmination for my own reckoning with lost history. It was called In the Pines, and as an homage, a memorial to the pine rockland landscape that once dominated South Florida and has been all but totally erased. And then I created a cemetery inside. I'm a huge fan of cemeteries. You can see a cemetery behind me. They're perfectly designed places to walk into the past. And we have some really beautiful ones in Miami, actually, and I'm always surprised at how few people know about them. So each one of the tombstones in the exhibition was kind of one of those aha moments where you think like, I can't believe I didn't know this. I can't believe they didn't taught me this in school. Whether it was like, I didn't know that there were seals on the beaches of Florida until the Spaniards slaughtered them. Or most recently that Arthur McDuffie, who I discovered as I was installing the exhibition, was murdered on the same block as the gallery, this block that I had driven by 1,000 times on North Miami Avenue on 38th Street. And I also included this large scale drawing. You may recognize those towers now from the first video. It's, you know, it's sort of this apocryphal vision of the profound effect the train's arrival had. And to remember that it was not only the beginning of something, but it was the end of a great many other things, which we have hardly begun to mourn or acknowledge. And maybe no surprise, I've gotten really into archaeology lately. This incredibly important site, color fossil site, that's the Deering Estate, considered the most important site south of Lake Okeechobee. It's where they proved that Paleo Indians have been here for 10,000 years, as well as like all kinds of really cool megafauna like mastodons and giant sloths. So I created a large scale drawing that was at the airport this past spring. It will be at Deering Estate next winter. And that's a direwolf skeleton. You can see in the middle, it was, among other things, the sinkhole was a den for direwolves, which is pretty cool. And then this is the last image before I show the last video, which is going to cover the Bahamian pioneers a little. It was a wallpaper and art and public places commission that for an affordable housing for the elderly building in South Dade called Caribbean Village. So I was covering some Caribbean influences. And then I will play the video. I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. A little nervous. I tend to plow through things. Hopefully you got that. But I just want to encourage you all to let you know that like this is stuff I just discover on my own, right? I'm not a historian, but it's so easy to access information, to go to archives, to learn things on your own. And the real stories are so much better than the myths and lies, and the small stories are usually better than the big ones. You know, I feel like sometimes I have this like X-ray vision. You walk by and, you know, spots and you think, oh yeah, there was a printing mill 100 years ago, or you find this like incredibly rare native slash plant in someone's backyard. And it's just, you know, it's going to improve your life. So learn more about what you live. And I will play this video.
Few today realize that Bahamians were some of the first settlers in what would become Miami, and were fundamental to the creation of the city as we know it today. White pioneers from the Northeast benefited enormously from their knowledge and expertise. Consider how profound the Caribbean culture, ecology, and cuisine has permeated South Florida, so pervasive as to be invisible, or rather identified as our own. It has seeped into our landscape, from the coconut palms to the mango explosions that herald our hurricane summers. They taught white settlers how to adapt to the heat and mosquitoes of the jungle wilderness, how to grow tropical foods, how to use local material. Black Bahamian laborers built some of our most treasured landmarks in Miami, including Vizcaya. They did the hardest work and received the least credit, the back-breaking work of clearing land and cutting roads and ditches through the jungle, through limestone, laying railroad tracks, grubbing the ancient saw palmettos of Miami Beach, and working the Kunti mills, Miami's first industry, processing the tuber of the ancient cycad plant, once a dominant plant of the pine rockland, into arrowroot starch, all for the benefit of white pioneers building empires. Along with the Seminoles, they influenced the character of Miami's architecture through their great skill in design elements. The old Bahamian section of Coconut Grove, commonly referred to as Kibo, still features many of these Bahamian-style homes. We owe an enormous debt to the Bahamian pioneers, who brought with them their knowledge of how to survive hurricanes and the harsh conditions of tropical living, and the literal fruits of its labor. Many of them are buried here at Miami City Cemetery, as well as in Coconut Grove and the recently discovered Lemon City Cemetery.
Oh my gosh, Christina, thank you so much for that. I learned a lot. I want to know you more, and I want you to come to my class. That's all I'm going to say. We're teaching a class on Miami. That was just perfect. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So really appreciate your sharing all your work with us tonight. And now we move on to our very last speakers, plural. Last but far from least, we have a particular additional treat tonight, grandson and grandfather duo, Billy Corben and Jerome Cohen, representing tonight the Jewish Museum of Florida, FIU. Billy Corben, who may or may not be known to folks, just kidding, known to everyone, is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker, a Florida native, lifelong Miamian, and co-founder of the Miami Beach-based production company, Rock on Shore. He has directed such documentaries as the Sundance Film Festival Selection Raw Deal, A Question of Consent, 2001. Cocaine Cowboys, 2016. Square Grouper, The Godfathers of Ganja, 2011. The Tanning of America, One Nation Under Hip Hop, 2014. Dogfight, 2015. Screwball, 2018. Magic City Hustle, 19. The HBO original documentary, 537 votes last year. And he was the executive producer, executively produced rather, by Adam McKay, The Big Short, Vice, and the ESPN 30 for 30s, The U, Broke, and The U Part 2 in 2014. His latest, I'm almost done here. Listen, if he accomplished a lot, we have no choice here. His latest 6-part documentary series, Cocaine Cowboys, The Kings of Miami, just came out this year and is streaming on Netflix. So of course we encourage all to watch. And he is accompanied here by his grandfather, Jerome Cohen, who was born in New York City in 1928 and went through school in Long Beach, New York. In 1946, following horrible discharge from the US Army, he joined his family in Miami. He graduated from the University of Miami Law School in 1951 and was already heavily involved in the real estate and construction business. In the late 50s, he briefly practiced law in Miami, and in 62, he relocated with his family to Philly, where he entered the corporate field and subsequently headed 3 public companies over the years. In 1977, he returned with his family to Miami, where he continued his corporate career until he retired in 2002. And upon returning to Miami, he and his wife immediately became involved in the arts and other charitable endeavors. Mr. and Mrs. Cohen are Society of Founders members of Mount Sinai Hospital, Bowman Ash Level founders of the University of Miami, and founders of Miami Jewish Health Systems. Mr. Cohen is a former member of the board of the Adrian Arsh Performing Arts Center, the Miami City Ballet, the Florida Grand Opera, and the Citizens Board of the University of Miami. I would say that is 2 incredibly accomplished family members right there. So I turn it over to the 2 of you, and I thank you both for being with us this evening. Thank you.
Say hi.
Thank you, Rebecca. For the record, it was an honorable discharge, not a horrible discharge. So just want to clarify that. That's all right, Rebecca. That's okay. Anyway, thank you for that very long introduction. We'll jump right into it since I know we have some limited time and want to have some time at the end for Q&A. My grandfather was very active in post-war construction and development in Miami Beach, building dozens of apartments, hotels, and various other buildings in and around Miami Beach, and so has a lot of knowledge in that area. And I want to kind of start with something on topic. In recent years, and particularly in recent days, there's been a lot of talk in the city of Miami Beach about last call at 2 a.m. and making ending liquor sales and closing bars at an earlier hour. And I understand that this is not a new debate in the city of Miami Beach, Grandpa. There are stories going back, I think, to the 1950s, where bar owners and business owners were attempting to subvert city ordinances and regulations with respect to liquor sales. Is that true?
Well, if I don't have to confess to being a subverter, it's correct.
And you have a story. I don't know what year is this story from?
In connection with closing hours, which seems to be the topic of conversation on Miami Beach today, I was not connected, but knowledgeable about a circumstance that is rather humorous. At a time when Miami Beach had a 3 o'clock closing hour requirement, many of the people who were employed and guests at the time would pour out of the clubs, the hotel, cocktail lounges, etc., and wind up on Treasure Island on the 79th Street Causeway.
In North Bay Village?
In North Bay Village. And they had a 7 a.m. closing requirement. Some years before, a gentleman that I graduated high school with in Long Beach, whose name at that time was Donald Lichtenstein, arrived in Miami and was told by some mutual friend to give Jerry Cohen a call, which he did, and he immediately told me that he had changed his name to Don Light.
No, I thought you were going to say Don Cohen or Don Corben rather.
Don Light joined the Miami Beach Fire Department, and we had Long Beach in common. So we stayed in touch with one another. Every few months we'd be in touch. He served his time. He retired at the retirement age, whatever that was, from the fire department, and came up with a brainstorm. On Normandy Isle, right as you cross over from the 79th Street Causeway and enter Normandy Isle, on the right-hand street, right on the street on the right, was a motel. Motel was large enough to have what they called a 4COP license at the time, and had a nice little cocktail lounge, which Don Light leased to operate from 7 a.m. to noon, as funny as that sounds. And of course, when 7 a.m. came, a goodly number of people poured out of the Treasure Isle, the 79th Street bars and restaurants, into Don Light's bar on Normandy Isle. And it turned out, as he explained to me, I went down there one morning about 7:30, quarter to 8 in the morning before I lit out for the jobs I was working on. And he told me that they forgot to put in a limit on when you could open. And so he took advantage of that. And he was jam-packed with people when I was there that morning. And of course, the situation was corrected very quickly. And Miami Beach adopted regulations that controlled not only when you had to close, but when you could open.
So they closed that loophole then.
It was closed, and Don lost his thriving business.
So the nightclub industry has always been not only a major economic force, an engine in Miami Beach, but of course a major draw of tourists and entertainers and business people alike. Tell us a little bit about the nightclub scene of Miami Beach back in that time period. I understand that this was prior to the hotels booking major acts. That was almost exclusively amongst the nightclubs in season. And where were these nightclubs situated in those days?
Well, the key is what you just said. The major hotels on Miami Beach did not play the name acts. And there were many, many of them that people will remember. Names like Jimmy Durante, Mae West was a big nightclub entertainer, Nat King Cole, Janie Powell. These are the people that were booked into the nightclubs, along with musical groups, which were very popular in the day. The nightclub section of town was kind of interesting because it's centered on the intersection. I'm just describing it as centered on the intersection of Alton Road and Dade Boulevard. If you come off the Venetian Causeway, on your left, as you came off the causeway onto Miami Beach by Purdy Avenue, you had Mother Kelly's. You then had the Copa, which became Copa City in 1948. And I built that building with Murray Wanger. Then you had the Beachcomber. Then you crossed Alton Road, and coming up was Gray's Inn, and another club that I actually can't even remember the name of, but it was very popular, especially with musical groups. I remember clearly going there to see Ernesto Laquana, the musical genius from Cuba. If you go to Alton Road, immediately north of Dade Boulevard, where the Walgreens is now, was a Club Ciro's, which I'll tell you about afterwards. I closed my career in the nightclub business with running Ciro's. If you go down the block, you came to one of the outstanding clubs was Kitty Davis's Airline Restaurant, who played acts like the Vagabonds and other mainly musical stars. So that and by the way, if you extend Dade Boulevard far enough, you'll end up at Liberty Avenue, which had the Park Restaurant and was subsequently a location in that area of Alan Gale's Supper Club, as well as Club 21, if I remember correctly. That was kind of sort of the scene. And it was all because the hotels were not playing major acts at that time.
But you were booking, Grandpa, you're right?
Yes.
Where are you? All right, where are you? Sit up.
I'm just looking at my notes to see which
thought you were-
story is next.
Well, you went way far afield with this. We're almost out of time. You gave us the whole map of the Miami Beach nightclub business. You were going to tell a story about booking acts. I think you said you told me the Fontainebleau was the first major hotel to start booking.
To my
acts.
recollection, yes.
But you as a nightclub owner and operator were booking major duty acts in your clubs.
Yes. The good example is Ciro's, I mentioned to you. But
That's not the story we're telling. We rehearsed this yesterday, Grandpa.
Well,
This is story number 3, Grandpa.
what story are we on at the moment?
Story number 3, Grandpa.
What about Ciro's?
You
Ciro's
didn't extend.
great.
We're not doing.
Ciro's a great
Ciro's is
story.
Ciro's
why
is story
I
number
like-
4, which we're
why I
not going to
like
have time to
Ciro's.
get to. Ay,
I want to tell you why I like Ciro's. Because
This is
right here, if you can see,
Turn it over.
it's upside down.
over, right?
Let's turn the other side.
And the other side with my picture on it. That is an ID card that was mentioned by our first guest, Jacqui Colyer, that she mentioned that all African Americans had to have them. Well, I had to have it because this is a card when I had Ciro's. I had the card each year when I had the club, but the only one I could find, and you helped me find it, among my memorabilia was the one from Ciro's. And Ciro's is a wonderful story. We opened Ciro's.
But we're not telling that story, Grandpa,
Why not?
because we rehearsed this last night. This is I'm literally I make a living as my director. The only person I can't direct is my own grandfather. This is we rehearsed the number 3 story, which you did an extended intro of, but never told the story about. I'm sorry, this is the number 2 story. I'm sorry, we are on the number 2 story.
You finally came back, right?
I know because we've gone so far afield, I'm confused now.
Well, I know you are. The number 2 story is Ciro's.
But we're not going to have time for no, it's not, is it?
Yes.
What's
No.
the number 4 story?
No, I'm not telling the number 4 story.
But which one was the number 4 story?
Billy,
Which one was it?
Billy,
Refresh my recollection.
you've done so many and you're working on so many movies. This particular production
I thought I was interviewing a football coach. I'm so lost right now.
I know you
Hang
are.
on. Tell me.
I think we have time. Let me tell you the Ciro's story because you'll love it.
All right.
Well, I think the audience will like it. It's a typical Miami story. Are you finished? There was a Jewish style comedian by the name of Alan Gale who actually made his residence in Surfside, Florida, and was booked all over the Eastern Seaboard in nightclubs. And I decided to close I didn't know I was closing it, but I was closing my nightclub career by leasing Ciro's for this particular season of 1958, according to my ID. We opened with Alan Gale, unusual time, mid-December, ran through Christmas and New Year's, and he was sensational. We served Jewish-style cooking during that period of time, and we were jammed every night. We then closed, as the nightclubs usually do at that time, and they reopen usually in the mid-January. We had nobody in the main room, so for want of something else to do, I said, why don't we continue Alan? Well, we did. We booked Alan for another 2 weeks, and unfortunately, nobody came to the club. I guess we had creamed the market at that point. So I turned to a partner of mine and I said, what do you think? I'll call New York, see if we can get somebody down here. And to make a long story short and make you happy, we got another Jewish entertainer by the name of Sammy Davis Jr. And it's a fact, he flew down to Miami as if it was an emergency without a contract, which wasn't written up till at least the end of the following week. And with 2 ads, one in the Sun Times, was that the paper that was being published on Miami Beach? I'm pretty sure that was it. And the Miami Herald, bingo. We opened on a Tuesday night and it was Katie bar the door. You literally could not get in the club. We ultimately had a call for police help by the end of that week to control the crowds that were gathering in front of the club. And the act that we had booked, which I must confess, I can't remember what the act was. He played right along with Sammy Davis Jr., or she did. And it was a smash hit. And probably one of the biggest hits I've ever had in the nightclub business. We had, I do remember the acts in the lounge. That was the Ternaires and Demita Joe, but I cannot for the life of me remember the other act in the main room.
Before we wrap up, I do want to tell a brief version of one of my favorite stories about a hotel you built in 1950. We built several of them around the same time with the same plan, called the Revere Hotel. Will you tell me about that and what happened to it?
Well, that was fun, but it was only fun 40 years later. A man came to me with a plan, and I bid as a contractor, I bid to build this building. And I got the job to build it. And I was very impressed with the plan. It wasn't a high quality building, but it was a very ordinary mid-rise building with what I called doodads around it that made it Art Deco. Obviously, you know, the Art Deco era was the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. And here we are in 1950, building an Art Deco hotel. I was so impressed that I bought a piece of property not far from there, down Ocean Drive. Was this at 11th Street, I believe?
The Revere was.
Yeah, I bought another one down, and on my own account, I built the same building, slightly changed by the architect, and sold it. I sold it quite quickly, very quickly. But I'm therefore responsible for building 2 Art Deco hotels down there, and I built a 3rd one, but I can't call it exactly the same. And what I'm really proud of is that at some time later, and I mean 40 years later, I'm reading the Sunday paper and I find out that an attorney who represents me on a regular basis at that time, by the name of Cliff Schulman with Greenberg Traurig, is in the process of permitting the raising, the tear down, or whatever you want to call it, demolition of the Revere. It seems that a gentleman by the name of Versace had bought the Netherlands apartment building directly next door to the Revere, which was built in the Art Deco era, but was not an Art Deco or considered an Art Deco building. He had bought that to create the Versace mansion. And he now wanted to buy the Revere, tear it down and build a swimming pool and whatever other amenities go with it. And I'm reading about Cliff, an attorney who I used regularly. So I called him on the phone and I said to him, Cliff, how can you even suggest tearing down an architectural gem like this? Of course, I couldn't say it or get it out without starting to laugh. And Chris said, what are you talking about? I said, Chris, I built that building 40 years ago. And he said, oh, I got the permits. You were such and such a construction company, Jerome Construction and Allied Construction. So he said, what? That building is a piece of crap. I said, don't use language like that. I mean, it's something I built with pride, not much, but a little pride. And as you know, and the story ends with Versace tearing down the Revere and building a very beautiful garden and swimming pool adjoining it. And Cliff, to be nice, sent me something that I don't know. I don't have a slideshow, but I do have this. I can't see if I've got it in the right place there. And I'm going to tell you what it reads. It says the Revere Hotel, and the caption reads, I have to put my glasses on. I don't want to get.
It says built by Jerome Cohen, 1950, demolished by Cliff Schulman, 1993. And what is it? What's in there?
It's a piece of concrete from the building.
Yes. Can we see it again, please?
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's only appropriate. I think it's only appropriate that we end our presentation with a chip off the old block.
Oh, Bill, please. I know you got a better one than that.
That's my closing line, Grandpa. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'll show myself out.
Thank you guys very much. That was wonderful. And I like the ending. Appreciate it. And you guys are getting lots of love on the chat. I don't know if you're able to see it, but let me just suggest that among the many comments we have, Billy, chill out. Your grandpa's great.
She's
And
no
so
friend.
on and so on. We have lots of excellent comments. Thanking you. Please don't stop. More stories, so forth and so on. So thank you. The audience loves you, and that was really an incredible treat. So I appreciate it.
Have I?
Thank you. So now I imagine everyone comes back on, right? So we can do a little bit of Q&A before we close out. I'm assuming that's how you guys run the show. Since I missed that meeting. All right, well, let's see, maybe not. Anyway, there's all kinds of questions. Maybe Jacqui, there we go. Jacqui comes back on too. Thank you for these three fantastic presentations. There's so many questions of such a variety that I'm just gonna kind of pick and choose a bit because we're running out of time as it is. So the very first question we got was for Jacqui, and I'm gonna actually combine a couple of them that are all meant for you. One of our listeners asks, what period is the Jim Crow era? And connected to that, are there scheduled tours of the historic Hampton House? And basically, how can I go and have a look? So if you would go historical and practical.
Oh, okay. The era from the Jim Crow era started probably shortly after, started in the 30s, end of the 20s, early 30s. And it lasted until the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, but the remnants of it remain even today. So it's not like it's gone. And I love Mr. Cohen's story about his ID card. The issue, Mr. Cohen, is that your ID card didn't keep you had to help you. You could stay on the beach with that ID card. My mom had to leave the beach with that ID card. So it's a different thing. Now, what's so cool about your story is that Sammy Davis Jr. stayed at the Hampton House during 1958. So I suspect that he performed at your club and then came back over here and performed at the Hampton House, because he always did the late set right here at the historic Hampton House, which is just an amazing, amazing story.
There, I went to see his late set on at least 2, maybe 3 occasions. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a totally different feel because, you know, the Hampton House was like home for him when he was in Miami. Like I said, until segregation ended. The Hampton House is open Thursday, right now, Thursday through Sunday, and you can come by for a tour at any time. Just go online and you can pay for your tours and book your tours and just come on in. We're at 4240 Northwest 27th Avenue, but just go to historichamptonhouse.org and you'll see all of it. We have a Martin Luther King room and a Cassius Clay room, well, Muhammad Ali room. And it's an amazing building. Once you walk in, you're just gonna go like, wow, did I just step back into the 50s? So it's a great place. You're gonna love it. And what else was there on that question, Rebecca?
That was it. You did it.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, there's lots more, but let's keep it for the moment.
Sorry.
Thank
Okay.
you. No, that's
Okay.
fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to try and get at least one in for each of you. All right, so we have a question for Christina. What archives do you use? Are they in Miami or are they in Tallahassee? And where's the Lemon City? I'm going to get 2 in 1. Where's Lemon City Cemetery located?
Oh, Jacqui probably could answer that too. I know Enid was really seminal in getting that preserved. It's not visible cemetery you see, but there is a marker, right? And it's like sort of in a weird spot in the parking lot of a housing development on 71st Street. So yeah. And as far as archives, I visit them all. I actually started off visiting the ones in Everglades National Park, which actually has archives, as most people don't know, national parks have them. I'm a really big fan of the Miami-Dade Library's archives downtown. Obviously History Miami, University of Miami has great ones, FIU, so they're all over. And people are just more than willing to bring out all the stuff for you, no matter who you are. You know, everyone gets treated the same. So they're super fun. If I didn't have to make art, I'd probably just look at archives all the time.
I totally get that. Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to move on to our last duo. We have a question from Susan Gladstone, the director of the Jewish Museum of Florida. She says, tell us about the Copa and Copa City and Josephine Baker. You probably all can do that, but I think it was meant for the last 2. So the Copa and Josephine Baker.
My very, very expensive director, Billy, helped me to choose the ones that I was going to use tonight. But before I go to answer that question, I'd like to say again to Ms. Colyer, what do you know about the Sir John?
The Sir John Hotel is where I learned how to swim as a child, because it was one of the Green Book hotels that taught little Black children how to swim. And there were great entertainers there. I mean, absolutely wonderful there,
Well,
because they did the late set there.
You stole my punchline. I was going to tell you that it was a green hotel. And 2 years before this Sears experience, I ended up having to run the Cotton Club Review starring Cab Calloway. And we had some 30 or 35 entertainers, all of whom had to stay at the off the beach, and they stayed at the Sir John for the entire season. This was the entire season, except
Wow.
Cab, and Cab had a friend on Miami Beach that he stayed at his home. And so I am very experienced. I don't know why we weren't at the Hampton. Maybe it was too expensive.
Probably. But I would love to talk to you at another time. Billy, I know he's your director, but I'd really love to talk to you, because I think that you can add so much to our story at the Hampton House, because I know that now that I know what you did, I know that most of the people who entertained at Ciro's, is it Ciro's?
Yeah.
probably stayed right here at the historic Hampton House.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
I've been fired after tonight, Jacqui, so it's all right.
in answer to that question about the Copa, very quickly, the Copa burned down. The original,
Oh.
it was called Copacabana,
Mm-hmm.
and it burned down on, this again was the nightclub on Dade Boulevard, just off the causeway. And Murray Wanger was the owner of the club, and he retained, I can't think of the name of the gentleman. Just a minute, I have it right here. I pulled out a piece of paper on it. Norman Bell Geddes, to design a new building called Copa City.
Okay.
And I built Copa City for Murray Wanger, and in an exchange of titles and all, ended up owning it overnight. And so,
Grandpa, they don't want Jewish geography. They want to hear about Josephine Baker, for crying out loud.
and during the course of the operation of the Copa, we had the pleasure of having, I did not run the Copa until Murray Wanger passed away suddenly in the late 50s, when I had to take over the Cotton Club Review. But she played the Copa. She played very few, but the biggest nightclubs in the United States, on a trip from France, which I believe was the first time she came to entertain in the United States after she became a big star. And they had the backup act was the Harmonica Rascals, and a line of girls, and she was the absolute end when it came to glamour. Her big thing was costume changes, and the women just loved it. So that was the story about Josephine Baker. We're the only club that she played while she was down here.
But she did play at the Fontainebleau, didn't she?
She may have come later to
Yeah.
the Fontainebleau,
Okay.
but this was the first time she was in the United States,
Okay.
I believe. Remember, I'm using a 90+ memory for this, so.
Amazing, amazing. We could keep talking forever, but I think I'm going to get in trouble if I allow it. So I'm going to have one last question, which kind of brings us full circle. So it's actually for Jacqui, but you'll see why it brings us full circle. So somebody writes in and says, I had the honor of working an event in hospitality at the historic Hampton House, in which the architectural firm who did the historic renovation was honoring their team. Could you talk with us about the renovations and preserving the original features? So we'll end with that. Yeah.
The renovation was absolutely amazing. And one of the things that we did was to really just try and be as authentic as possible about everything. Our architect was just amazing and really understood what we were trying to do. So whenever you visit the Hampton House, you will see that we went back and found as much of the historical evidence as we could. And the bar that I'm sitting at right now is exactly like the one from the period that I'm sitting on the stool that Cassius Clay sat on. You can see him in the mural, but I'm sitting on that exact, well, it's not the exact same stool, but it's a replica of the stool that Cassius Clay sat on when he sat there and told everybody he was the greatest and the most beautiful and the smartest, and nobody could touch that. So when you come, we'll talk to you about it. The wallpaper that we have on the walls is the exact replica of what we had, because we had so many pictures of the historic, celebrities at the historic Hampton House, including, like I said, Malcolm X but Martin Luther King sat on the wall right here. Sammy Davis Jr., we know he was here because he took a picture in one of the rooms and at the front desk. So come on over. You'll have it'll be an interesting time, and you'll learn a lot about what went on in Miami, and not only just Miami, but what went on in the United States, and how Black people figured out how to get around it and how to have a good time. And I know that Mr. Cohen charged a lot more than we charge at the Hampton House for Sammy Davis Jr. So lots of people came to the Hampton House because they knew that they probably get a different kind of show. And Sammy would take off his tie and just, do whatever. But he also came with Frank Sinatra, which was really amazing because Frank Sinatra came to the Hampton House just to show that segregation was wrong. And in fact, he and Dean Martin and a few of the other Rat Pack stayed right here at the Hampton House just to prove a point that segregation had to end. So, yeah, it's an amazing place. Come on over. We'd love to have you Thursday through Sundays for right now.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful place to end. Everyone in the chat is blowing up about how great it is to make all these connections that I hope will continue long after this evening's event. So thank you to everyone behind the scenes who only we can see. And that's it for tonight. Everyone take care, be safe, and that's it. Thank you. This is really wonderful. Appreciate
Good night.
it. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.